The arrow whistled past his ear, so close he could feel the fletching brush against his skin. Yoshitsune stood perfectly still on the narrow wooden bridge, surrounded by 20 enemy samurai, each one sworn to take his head. His heart was pounding so violently, he was certain his enemies could hear it echoing across the ravine below. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to fight wildly, to let his rage explode into the chaos of steel and blood that would surely follow. But instead, something extraordinary happened. In the space between one heartbeat and the next, Yoshitsune made a discovery that would not only save his life that day, but would reveal a secret about human emotion that could transform how you handle every moment of overwhelming fear and destructive anger for the rest of your life. What he did in the next 60 seconds defied every rule of combat, every expectation of human behavior under extreme stress, and yet it worked so brilliantly that his enemies actually lowered their weapons and stepped aside. Today, I am going to show you the exact internal process that Yoshitsune used to transform terror into unshakable calm and rage into laser-focused power, and how you can apply this same ancient technique to master the emotional storms that are sabotaging your relationships, your career, and your peace of mind right now. Picture this scene with me. It is the winter of 1185, and 20-year-old Yoshitsune stands at the edge of a cliff overlooking the inland sea, watching enemy ships approach through the morning mist. Behind him, his small army of 3,000 men faces the largest naval force Japan has ever assembled, led by the mighty Taira clan. The odds are impossible. His hands shake not from the cold, but from a fear so intense it threatens to freeze his blood in his veins. In his chest, rage burns like molten metal, because his own brother Yoritomo has betrayed him, forcing him into this desperate final battle. Any normal person would be consumed by these emotions, paralyzed by terror, or blinded by fury. But Yoshitsune does something that will change the course of Japanese history forever. He closes his eyes, breathes deeply, and begins to practice what he calls the transformation of storm into stillness. In the next 10 minutes, I am going to show you exactly what he did in that moment, and how you can use his precise methods to master every fear that holds you back, and every burst of anger that destroys your relationships and sabotages your success. Before we dive deeper into Yoshitsune's revolutionary approach to emotional mastery, I want you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button if you have ever felt paralyzed by fear when you needed to be strong, or if anger has ever made you say or do something you deeply regretted later. Subscribe to this channel because we are building a community of people committed to applying ancient wisdom to modern challenges, and I promise you that every video here will give you practical tools that actually work in real life. Then, in the comments below, I want you to share this exact phrase: I am ready to transform my storms into stillness. Write exactly that. And then tell me which emotion challenges you more, fear or anger, and how it showed up in your life this week. Your sharing helps everyone in this community realize they are not alone in these struggles. And together we can support each other in applying Yoshitsune's teachings to create real change. Now, let me tell you what was actually happening in Yoshitsune's mind during that pivotal moment at the Battle of Dan no Ura. Most people think that mastering emotions means suppressing them, or pretending they do not exist. This is exactly backwards, and it is why most people remain slaves to their emotional reactions their entire lives. Yoshitsune discovered something profound. Emotions are not problems to be solved. They are information to be decoded and energy to be redirected. When fear gripped him on that clifftop, he did not try to convince himself he was not afraid. Instead, he asked himself this precise question: what is this fear trying to protect? The answer came immediately. His fear was trying to protect his life, his men's lives, and his honor. It was actually love in disguise, love for everything he valued most. This single shift in perspective transformed his relationship with fear forever. Instead of seeing fear as evidence of weakness, he began to see it as evidence of what mattered most to him. The same principle applied to his rage toward his brother's betrayal. Rather than allowing anger to cloud his judgment or drive him to reckless action, Yoshitsune asked, "What is this anger demanding?" The answer was justice, loyalty, and recognition of his true worth. His anger was not evil or destructive. It was his inner fire demanding that he live up to his highest potential and refuse to accept treatment beneath his dignity. By understanding anger as righteous energy that needed direction rather than destruction, he could harness its power without being consumed by it. This is the first fundamental principle of Yoshitsune's emotional mastery. Emotions are messengers. not masters. When you learn to listen to the message instead of being overwhelmed by the delivery, you gain access to wisdom that most people never discover. But understanding emotions intellectually is only the first step. Yoshitsune developed a practical system for transforming emotional energy in real time, even in the most intense circumstances. He called it the 3 breaths of battlefield awareness. The first breath is the breath of acknowledgement, where you fully feel and name the emotion without judgment. You say internally, "I notice that I am afraid," or "I notice that I am angry." With the same detached curiosity, you might observe a bird landing on your windowsill. The second breath is the breath of inquiry, where you ask the emotion what it is trying to tell you or protect. The third breath is the breath of transformation, where you consciously direct the energy of that emotion toward your highest purpose. Fear becomes fuel for preparation and caution. Anger becomes fuel for determination and righteous action. This entire process takes less than 60 seconds, but it creates a completely different neurological and psychological response than simply reacting from the emotion. Let me give you a concrete example of how this works in modern life. Sarah, a project manager at a tech company, discovered these principles during one of the most challenging periods of her career. Her team was behind schedule on a critical product launch. Her boss was pressuring her daily with increasingly aggressive emails, and she felt overwhelmed by a combination of fear about losing her job and anger at the unrealistic expectations being placed on her shoulders. Every morning, she would wake up with her stomach in knots, and by afternoon, she was snapping at her team members and spiraling into emotional reactions that only made everything worse. When Sarah learned about Yoshitsune's 3 breaths technique, she decided to try it during what felt like the most stressful meeting of her career. Her boss had just publicly criticized her team's progress in front of the entire department, and she could feel that familiar combination of panic and rage building inside her chest like a pressure cooker about to explode. Instead of reacting immediately, she took the first breath of acknowledgement and said to herself, "I notice that I am afraid of being seen as incompetent, and I notice that I am angry at being humiliated unfairly." With the second breath of inquiry, she asked these emotions what they were trying to protect. The fear was protecting her reputation and her family's financial security. The anger was protecting her sense of dignity and her team's morale. With the third breath of transformation, she consciously channeled that fear into meticulous preparation for her response, and that anger into determined advocacy for her team. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but powerful, her words were precise and fact-based, and she presented a clear action plan that addressed every concern while defending her team's efforts with evidence and data. Not only did she keep her job, but she was promoted 3 months later because her boss was impressed by her ability to stay composed and solution-focused under pressure. This is exactly what Yoshitsune discovered on that bridge surrounded by enemies. When you learn to work with your emotions instead of being controlled by them, you access a level of personal power that most people never experience. But here is what most people miss about emotional mastery. And this is where Yoshitsune's insights go far deeper than simple breathing techniques. He understood that fear and anger are not random occurrences that happen to us. They are precise information systems that reveal our deepest values and strongest motivations. Every time you feel afraid, you are receiving data about what matters most to you. Every time you feel angry, you are receiving data about where your boundaries have been crossed or your values have been violated. The problem is that most of us have been conditioned to see these emotions as problems to be eliminated, rather than intelligence to be decoded. When you shift this fundamental perspective, everything changes. Let me share with you the second principle that Yoshitsune mastered, which he called the way of the responsive warrior. This principle is based on his observation that the strongest fighters on the battlefield were not the ones who attacked with the most force, but the ones who could read their opponent's energy and redirect it most skillfully. He noticed that when an enemy charged at him with rage, trying to overpower that rage with more rage only created chaos and unpredictability. But when he could remain centered in his own emotional state while clearly perceiving his opponent's emotional state, he could use their momentum against them, turning their aggressive energy into their own defeat. This same principle applies to every emotional interaction in your daily life. When someone approaches you with anger, your natural instinct might be to defend yourself with anger. But this almost always escalates the conflict and damages the relationship. When someone approaches you with fear or anxiety, your natural instinct might be to dismiss their concerns or try to fix them immediately. But this often makes them feel unheard and increases their anxiety. Yoshitsune's way of the responsive warrior teaches you to stay grounded in your own emotional center while acknowledging and working with the other person's emotional energy in a way that creates resolution rather than escalation. Here is how this works in practice. When your teenage daughter comes home 2 hours past curfew and immediately starts defending herself with angry justifications before you have even said a word, instead of matching her anger with your own anger about her disrespect and your fear about her safety, you can apply Yoshitsune's responsive warrior approach. First, you ground yourself in your emotional center by taking those 3 breaths and acknowledging that your anger comes from love and your fear comes from care for her well-being. Then, you read her emotional energy and recognize that her defensive anger is likely covering fear about disappointing you or losing your trust. Instead of attacking her defenses, you respond to the fear underneath by saying something like, "I can see you are worried about how I am going to react, and I appreciate that you came home safely. Help me understand what happened so we can figure this out together." This approach disarms her defensive anger because you are responding to her underlying fear with reassurance rather than responding to her surface anger with more anger. The conversation becomes collaborative rather than combative, and you can address the curfew issue while strengthening your relationship instead of damaging it. But Yoshitsune's mastery went even deeper than individual emotional encounters. He developed what he called the practice of emotional prediction, which allowed him to anticipate and prepare for emotional challenges before they occurred. He realized that certain situations, certain people, and certain times of day were more likely to trigger his fear and anger, and instead of being caught off guard by these predictable patterns, he could prepare specific strategies for handling them skillfully. This is the 3rd principle of his emotional mastery system, and it is perhaps the most practical for modern life because it shifts you from reactive mode to proactive mode in your emotional experience. Think about your own life right now. Are there specific situations that consistently trigger your fear? Maybe it is public speaking, difficult conversations with your spouse, or taking on new challenges at work. Are there specific situations that consistently trigger your anger? Maybe it is dealing with slow customer service, being interrupted during important work, or feeling like your contributions are not being appreciated. Yoshitsune would say that these predictable emotional triggers are actually gifts because they show you exactly where you need to develop greater mastery. And they give you opportunities to practice your emotional skills in controlled ways, rather than being blindsided by unexpected challenges. When you know that Monday morning meetings always trigger your anxiety, you can prepare by practicing your 3 breaths technique beforehand, visualizing yourself staying calm and centered, and even having specific phrases ready to use if you feel your anxiety rising during the meeting. When you know that dealing with your mother-in-law always triggers your frustration, you can prepare by reminding yourself of what that frustration is protecting, setting clear internal boundaries about how long you will engage in challenging conversations, and having a plan for taking breaks or redirecting the conversation when needed. Now, I want to pause here and speak directly to you, because I know that some of you might be thinking that this all sounds too simple, or that your emotional challenges are too intense or too deeply rooted for these techniques to make a real difference. I want you to know that Yoshitsune faced some of the most extreme emotional challenges imaginable. He was abandoned by his father, hunted by his enemies, betrayed by his own brother, and forced to fight for his life on a regular basis. If these principles could help him maintain his emotional equilibrium in those circumstances, they can absolutely help you with whatever you are facing. The key is consistent practice, not perfect execution. Yoshitsune did not master these techniques overnight, and you will not either. But every time you apply them, even imperfectly, you are building emotional muscles that will serve you for the rest of your life. The 4th principle of Yoshitsune's emotional mastery system is what he called the integration of storm and stillness. He discovered that trying to eliminate emotional intensity from his life actually weakened him as a warrior and as a person. Emotions are energy, and energy is power. The goal is not to become emotionally flat or detached, but to learn how to experience the full range of human emotion while maintaining your ability to think clearly and act wisely. This means learning to feel your fear fully while still moving forward with courage. This means learning to feel your anger fully while still responding with wisdom and compassion. This means learning to feel your sadness fully while still maintaining hope and determination. Most people swing between 2 extremes. Either they suppress their emotions and become disconnected from their own inner life, or they are overwhelmed by their emotions and cannot function effectively. Yoshitsune found the middle path that allows you to be fully human and fully effective at the same time. Let me tell you about Marcus, a police officer who applied this principle during one of the most challenging periods of his career. Marcus had always prided himself on being able to stay calm under pressure, but after responding to several traumatic incidents in quick succession, he found himself either completely numb to everything around him or explosively reactive to minor frustrations at home. He felt like he was losing himself, and his wife was threatening to leave because she said she did not recognize the man she had married. When Marcus learned about Yoshitsune's integration principle, he realized that he had been trying to shut down his emotional responses entirely as a way of protecting himself from the pain of his job. But this was also shutting down his ability to connect with his family and find meaning in his work. He began practicing a modified version of the 3 breaths technique that allowed him to feel his emotions fully while still maintaining his professional composure. When he responded to a domestic violence call, instead of disconnecting from his natural empathy and outrage, he would acknowledge these emotions internally while channeling them into more thorough evidence collection and more compassionate interaction with the victim. When he came home after a difficult day, instead of either dumping his emotional baggage on his family or withdrawing into silence, he would take a few minutes to process his emotions privately, using Yoshitsune's techniques, and then intentionally shift his energy toward being present and loving with his wife and children. Within 6 months, Marcus reported feeling more like himself than he had in years. His marriage was stronger than ever, and he had been commended by his department for his exceptional handling of sensitive cases. This brings us to the 5th and perhaps most profound principle of Yoshitsune's system, which he called the warrior's heart of compassion. He realized that the ultimate goal of mastering fear and anger was not to become invulnerable or invincible, but to become more capable of serving others and contributing to the world in meaningful ways. When you are constantly being hijacked by your emotional reactions, your energy is absorbed by internal drama, and you have little left to give to the people and causes that matter most to you. But when you learn to work skillfully with your emotions, you free up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy that can be directed toward love, creativity, leadership, and service. Yoshitsune understood that his emotional mastery was not just a personal achievement, it was a gift he could offer to everyone whose life he touched. This is where the real transformation happens, not just in your inner experience, but in your relationships and your impact on the world. When you are no longer controlled by your fear, you can take risks that allow you to grow and contribute in ways that were previously impossible. When you are no longer controlled by your anger, you can address conflicts and injustices with strategic effectiveness rather than reactive destruction. When you understand that your emotions are information rather than instructions, you can make decisions based on your deepest wisdom rather than your momentary impulses. This is what Yoshitsune discovered on that bridge, surrounded by enemies who could have killed him in seconds. By mastering his own emotional state, he was able to see possibilities that fear and anger would have made invisible. By staying centered in his values and purpose, he was able to respond to the situation with creativity and courage that transformed potential disaster into legendary victory. Now, let me give you the specific daily practices that will allow you to develop this same level of emotional mastery in your own life. The first practice is what Yoshitsune called the morning preparation of the mind. Every morning, before you engage with the demands and stresses of your day, spend 5 minutes visualizing the emotional challenges you are likely to face and rehearsing how you want to respond to them. If you know you have a difficult conversation scheduled, visualize yourself staying calm and centered during that conversation. If you know you have a deadline that usually triggers your anxiety, visualize yourself working steadily and confidently toward that deadline. This is not about positive thinking or denial. It is about mental rehearsal that prepares your nervous system to respond differently when these challenges actually arise. Athletes use this technique to improve their physical performance, and you can use it to improve your emotional performance. The second practice is the evening review of emotional lessons. Every evening before you go to sleep, spend 5 minutes reflecting on the emotional challenges you faced during the day and what you learned from them. When did you handle your emotions skillfully, and what made that possible? When did your emotions hijack you, and what would you do differently next time? This is not about self-criticism. It is about building emotional intelligence through conscious reflection. Over time, you will begin to see patterns in your emotional reactions that allow you to become more proactive and less reactive in your responses. The third practice is what Yoshitsune called the cultivation of emotional courage. This means deliberately placing yourself in situations that trigger mild versions of your most challenging emotions, so that you can practice your emotional mastery skills in low-stakes environments. If public speaking terrifies you, You might start by speaking up more in small group meetings. If confrontation triggers your anger, you might practice having calm discussions about minor disagreements with safe people. The goal is not to torture yourself, but to build your emotional muscles gradually so that when bigger challenges arise, you are prepared to handle them skillfully. This is exactly what warriors do with physical training. They prepare for battle by practicing combat skills in controlled environments, and you can prepare for emotional challenges by practicing emotional skills in manageable situations. The fourth practice is the creation of emotional alliances. This means building relationships with other people who are also committed to emotional growth and who can support you in developing greater mastery over your inner life. Yoshitsune understood that even the strongest warrior could not succeed entirely alone, and emotional mastery is much easier to develop when you have allies who understand what you are working toward and who can offer encouragement, accountability, and perspective when you face setbacks. This might mean joining a meditation group, finding a therapist who understands emotional regulation techniques, starting a book club focused on personal development, or simply having regular conversations with friends or family members about your emotional growth journey. If you have made it this far in this video, you are clearly serious about transforming your relationship with your emotions, and I want to make sure you have everything you need to succeed. This channel is dedicated to bringing you the most practical and powerful wisdom from history's greatest teachers, and I promise you that every video you watch here will give you tools that actually work in real life. If you found value in Yoshitsune's teachings about mastering fear and anger, please subscribe to this channel and ring that notification bell so you never miss new content that can help you continue growing. I genuinely care about your success and your well-being, and I want to be part of your journey toward emotional mastery and personal transformation. In the comments below, please share how you plan to apply one specific technique from this video in your life this week. Be specific about the situation where you will use it and what you hope to achieve. Your commitment to action and your willingness to share your journey encourages everyone in this community and helps us all grow together. Remember, wisdom without action is just entertainment, but wisdom applied consistently becomes transformation. You have everything you need to begin mastering your emotions like Yoshitsune mastered his, and I cannot wait to hear about the victories you achieve when you put these ancient principles into practice in your modern life.